down for the sake of the screenplay, to exile to Earth. In that book, the anti-hero or the alien who is born here on Earth and has many, many lifetimes on Earth is from Cellular, in a planet that's not too dissimilar to ours, except there's less nitrogen in the air and a few other dissimilarities. But it's a very similar world with lush forests, and architectural buildings with Roman and Greco throwback designs. And the people all have very, very good memories. They can remember before this lifetime. They can remember other existences. That is in the book, Exile to Earth. So, yes.
Well, how can I say it? I mean, it's just so many things all out through mankind at points that we're being visited. The thing I don't... Oh, yeah. The thing that kind of gets me is that some of the guests, or not even the guests, even the callers I have, they keep telling me that these aliens are warm, fuzzy, friendly things. And I don't think, I grew up, I don't know how old you are, but I'm going on 67. I grew up to Leave It to Beaver, Donna Reed show, Father Knows Best.
Yeah.
Okay, where everybody loved everybody. I mean, and everybody knew the neighbors, and everybody was friendly and would help out. Well, society has changed so much in just that amount of time. And certainly it's even changed before the 1900s, before Leave It to Beaver came on. Now, let's look at it this way. If some civilization is so far more advanced than us to come to Earth on a UFO or go through a portal or whatever, how they get here, they're not going to have the same type of feelings we grew up with, because look how much we lost from the late 50s to now. We lost a lot. So some civilization 20,000 years, 50,000, 100,000 years ahead of us are going to maybe not even look at us, with love and compassion, because they might not even realize what love and compassion is, that what we think of.
Mm-hmm. Well, in the jungles and forests of Asia, there used to be a big situation with man-eating tigers. And this is something, again, that we caused by hunters failing to kill on the hunt the tiger. They would wound the tiger, shoot him in the paw, shoot him in the eye, shoot out an eye, and the tiger would then have diminished abilities to hunt. So it couldn't help but to stay alive. It would hunt the most obvious victim, which would be human beings that can't run very fast. But normally it would have, if it was not hurt by a poor marksman, it would have continued on its normal menu, which was, antelope, zebra, whatever. The situation was so bad that if you were to go to that area and you would tell people that you'd seen a tiger in a cage in Chicago Zoo or New York City, they would look at you and they would probably stone you, because they've had relatives, they've had friends, they themselves have been attacked by these. This was back, of course, many years ago. It's not so much now, but it was many years ago. There was a real situation with these man-eaters. And it's the same with aliens. The idea, it is titillating, and it perks the interest of a small percentage right now of the population, mainly because people have to get on with their lives. But the majority of us, Earth dwellers, space travelers on the planet Earth, isn't real, just like it isn't real to us that there could be 100 man-eating tigers in an area of 50 square miles, killing 4,000 or 5,000 people a year, eating them. See what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
Until we would go to Asia and live in that area, then it would become very real. But since we're not there, there's no physical, tangible evidence. It's kind of like, oh, okay, that's a nice pipe dream, or that's a nice thought. Okay, let's turn on the football game.
Oh, yeah.
See what I'm saying?
Well, but that's how we are, though. You know what? I mean, something major can happen, like a hurricane can come in, people die, they lose their homes, right? After about a week and a half, people lose interest. That's the problem with our society. A week and a half later, the average person across the country, they don't care about it anymore. It didn't happen to them. By the way, on the news last week, they went out and killed a man-eating tiger because it was going around killing people. And I can't remember. I can't remember what country it was, but that was on the news.
Yeah. I mean, they're still out there, but they're not nearly in great quantities. I think there's been so much poaching, killing the tigers for their skins, for their talons, killing the elephants for their ivory, of course, which is also despicable. But right, absolutely, Gary, absolutely right. It's too much pain. People don't want to be looking at pain. I mean, they might take a little dose of it, just a stimulant, like Edgar Allan Poe's horror stories. I have a theory, because I wrote a book about it, that his stories, he wrote them to get the attention of people who normally wouldn't read Dickens or, somebody else like that. He wrote stuff that will grab you. He knew it would grab you. And it's hard to keep people abreast of what's going on because it's so easy to get into kind of a doped, semi-hypnotic state, as you were saying.
Oh, yeah. And, you have the people who naturally are... the sun could be out, right? And you tell them, it's a sunny day. They're going to come back and say, no, it's not. It's cloudy. I mean, they're going to say whatever the opposite is. My feeling really strongly is that I do feel that there is UFOs. I do feel that we're being visited. I don't think they're as friendly as I hear all the time. Now, there might be some. I don't know. But, it's like Timothy Collin will be back on my show. Now, I think you know who he is. He was a abductee that was implanted, that Dr. Roger Lear removed the implant. Now, I've talked to him probably 3 or 4 times already on my show. And, each time I get a little bit more information, he'll be back on again. But again, too, even himself, I mean, when he found out he had an implant, he didn't, his wife was with him when all this actually happened. And I asked, well, did your wife check to see if she had an implant too? And he said, no, she didn't want to find out. She just didn't want to know.
Yeah.
And that's...
Don't want to find out, yeah.
That's denial. But the thing is, after he had this implant removed, maybe a year or so later, he saw another UFO roughly in the same area over this one mountain or hill side where he saw it the first time. Him and his wife are going to town. And I said to him, did you ever go back and see if you had another implant after that? Maybe they re-implanted you. He didn't want to do it. He didn't, he just wanted it over with.
Yep, that's true. It's unpleasant things that we turn our face away from quite often.
Well,
after the fact, you see it, and then you turn your face away from it.
Well, it's something I'm doing too, and I'm not trying to ride on this UFO thing, but back in the mid '70s, I was coming back from North Carolina with my then wife, and we got into New Mexico. And I saw this huge bright light. And I was doing maybe 100 miles an hour on the freeway or the road going through the desert. And I thought, oh, my God, I'm going to, it must be a police helicopter or something. I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get a big ticket. I'm going to be arrested. You know what goes in your mind. I pull off the side of the road, Charles, because the whole side of my car was lit up. The road was lit up brighter than daylight where it actually hurt your eyes. That's how bright it was. I got out of the car. I looked up there. And the light was so intense. And you know what? Maybe 5 seconds later, it was gone. But there was not a single sound. Now, I'm going to go ahead quite a few years. I'm going to go into like the 1990s. Okay? I went into the doctor because I was having some problems. And, they did all those type of tests, x-rays, the MRI, whatever that is. And, I didn't think anything of it. And I was sitting here waiting to talk to the doctor. And the doctor's head nurse comes out into the lobby and she says, hey, Gary, where did you get that piece of metal in the middle of your back next to your spine. And I said, I never, got hurt there. I never. And she goes, well, the doctor wants to talk to you. And I get to the doctor's office, and the doctor goes, you got a piece of metal, blankety blank. I don't even remember the size. Because at that time, I really didn't pay attention that much. You know how you kind of like, oh, okay. And I said, well, what is it? And he goes, well, it's a little piece of metal by your spine. I said, well, can you remove it? And he goes, no, because if I remove it, it could paralyze you and you'll be in the wheelchair the rest of your life. Now, back years before that, I broke my tailbone and they put it back together. That was 6 inches lower than what this piece of metal is. Okay, I didn't think anything of it for a few years later, or quite a few years later. In the early 2000s, one of my sons got in trouble, and I had to go to court once a month with him, for a review with the judge with him. And every time I went into the courthouse, I would set the alarms off. And, to the point where you empty your wallets, you take your belt off. When you're a big guy, I got to warn you, you take your belt off, you risk the pants dropping down your knees when they tell you to put your arms out like this. The thing is, every time, for a whole year, once a month, the alarm went off every time I went in, and they couldn't figure out what it was. When I went to the airport to go on a flight, I set the alarms off. And, I didn't think much of it to about 2 months ago when I was talking to Michael W. Hall. He's my weekend host. He's also a lawyer in Washington State. He's really into UFOs, and he runs a group called the UFO I-Team. It kind of hit me. And the only thing I can think of, and I have never given it any thought all these years, Charles, when I pulled off that road in that desert in New Mexico, something must have happened, even with me, because, that 5 seconds could have been who knows how long. It was just 5 seconds in my mind. I have, like I said, where that metal is, there's no scars, there's no signs of anything, how it could have got there. Never, all these years, I never thought about it here till about 2 months ago.
Like Men in Black, where they shine the light in the guy's face and he goes out.
Yeah.
And you were put out, and who knows what happened when you were out for who knows how long, and they just slipped you a little Mickey, didn't they?
I don't know. I'm just wondering, too bad they didn't abduct my wife at the time. That would have sure saved a lot.
Yeah, give her one, too.
Yeah. Oh, no, they could have took her on a free ride to, wherever. I would have been extreme.
Well, you said she was screaming at the top of her lungs, and maybe she saw one of these things and just, blanked out and just blotted out of her memory.
All I know is for a good hour or two after that, she was terrified and, and looking at the sky for anytime, even a plane would go by. Oh no, that's a UFO. It was a UFO. It was really, I didn't know what it was because back then, I didn't honestly, I didn't believe in UFOs back in the early 70s. That's even before I got into broadcasting.
Yeah, you were just loafing across the desert in your fast car, and you were having fun.
Oh, I was having fun too. I thought I was getting pulled over. So I don't know. I what I'm doing here is I'm scheduled next week for my health issues. But one thing I did talk to the doctor about, I said I want to figure out what this piece of metal is in my back and how it could have gotten there. And that's what we're going to do next week because I'm kind of curious. I mean, all these years, I never remember getting hurt or anything in that part of my body.
Well, as far as you can tell, it's not transmitting anything to you or out of your spine area, right? I
don't think so. No, the only thing it does is sets off any type of alarm with when they're looking for metal. Mm-hmm.
And it's not a deposit. You sure that it's not just a deposit? Because calcium is a metal. Most people don't know that it's a metal.
No, from what the doctors actually said, it was a sliver of a weird shaped metal, and that's what they kept saying to me. They said, "Well, have you ever had?"
Well, they can get right down on there, Gary, and they can take a photograph of it. They can tell you if there's a serial number on it even.
Well, I want to know what it is. I mean, I just from the standpoint, I like I said, I didn't give it any thought to recently, and I just kind of like. Why do I set alarms off? I mean, you could put me naked, and I set alarm off. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah. Well, you be sure to get in touch with me after you find out what it is, because I want to know now.
Yeah. Of course, then, the other weird thing, Charles, is my wife.